Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into another installment of Good Morning Broncos, your daily dose of Broncos coffee talk and more as we dive deep into what's going on in the Valley. I'm your host, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. You can check out my written work, milehighsports.com. But make sure you tune in every single morning, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time for Good Morning Broncos. Pour yourself a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, sit down. What's going on in Dove Valley? This is what we're going to break down. We're going to dive deep into that here on the show. So if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that little subscribe button down below so you never miss out on what's going on with this team. Now, first and foremost, let's talk about Thursday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center as the Broncos get ready to conclude their first overall week of training camp. Now, Thursday's practice was closed off to the public, no fans in attendance. And so that meant that our media restrictions that we have on live tweeting, they went into effect. So you didn't get many updates as practice was going on. But to be honest with you, there wasn't much to gain from Thursday's practice. It was non-padded. They were in helmet, shoulder pads, so we call that shells. And they really emphasized red zone work, some more 7-on-7 individual drills, because right now at this part of training camp, the offense is still going through some install periods here under Sean Payton, and the defense, they're a little bit more ahead of the game a little bit. So they have a little bit more flexibility in what they're able to do during team periods, during 7-on-7. So with that said, let's dive into our day 7 Broncos camp recap that I shot yesterday following practice. Here's everything that you need to know. On Thursday, the Denver Broncos didn't have full pads as they went helmet, shoulder pad, shells, but the tempo was the key once again for Broncos head coach Sean Payton. A heavy emphasis in some more continued red zone work, and in the first period of red zone 7-on-7, each offensive unit, the first team, the second team, and the third team, each had efficient days. A little bit later on in practice, when they transitioned to their team period, the Broncos defense ramping up the pressure once again. The pads will come back on for the Broncos tomorrow at the Centura Health Training Center, where fans will be back in attendance. Broncos head coach Sean Payton said that tomorrow's practice will be a 2-minute drill emphasis, so that is some competitive periods that we're looking forward to seeing here at Broncos camp. Now, some house cleaning news. The Broncos unfortunately got some bad news surrounding inside linebacker Jonas Griffith. He suffered a torn ACL, and he will be out for the remainder of the season, placed on injured reserve. In the meantime, the Broncos, they added Austin Ajike. He's a veteran linebacker, played his college ball at UNLV, more recently NFL for the Carolina Panthers. He's got good size to him, and he moves really well. He was in for rookie minicamp and tryouts earlier in the offseason for the Denver Broncos. Aside from all that, we'll be back with all the Broncos news content coverage that you need here. Mile High Sports, I'm Cody Roark. Obviously, for the Broncos, it's a big blow for them to lose linebacker Jonas Griffith for the entire season. It was unfortunate what had happened, and I saw the play happen initially a few days ago during the special teams drill. He was crossing over on one of the drills. He went to go step inside, stepped on somebody's foot, saw his knee buckling. You never want to make the assumption, but the MRI confirmed his ACL is torn. And this is just unfortunate for Jonas Griffith because a few years ago, Broncos GM George Payton traded for him because they needed linebacker depth, but more importantly, they needed some help on the special teams side of the ball. Well, Jonas Griffith a few years ago started the final 4 games of the season for the Broncos under Vic Fangio, finished with 40 tackles in just 4 games while playing at the starting linebacker position. He suffered a dislocated elbow last year on the second play of their first preseason game. And then at some point throughout last season, I think it was after the Tennessee Titans game, he suffered a season-ending foot injury in practice. Jonas, when you look at him, a hybrid type player, big, tall, physical, fast as can be. So yeah, it's a big loss. And, I had a chance to ask Alex Singleton yesterday when he was at the podium how big of a blow it is. And he said, losing Jonas is a massive blow because, hey, there was a game last year, if you remember them taking on the Tennessee Titans, where it was Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, and Jonas Griffith. They each got the start there as they limited Derrick Henry to only under 60 yards rushing in that game. So he is a player who has starting capability, signed his exclusive rights free agent tender this offseason. He is now officially placed on the injured reserve list, and the Broncos had to make another move in terms of bringing in another linebacker, Austin Ajike. He played his college football at UNLV. More recently, he played for the Carolina Panthers. And for him, just watching him at practice, he was there. He was in the building. No pads, once again, I have to reiterate that, just shells. but for his size, he moves really, really well. And so he's going to add another dynamic to that Broncos inside linebacker room as training camp goes on and as their first preseason game approaches next week against the Arizona Cardinals. It's on Friday. It's going to be a Friday evening game on NFL Network or here locally on 9 News if you live in the Denver area. But what does this mean for the Broncos linebacker depth? Who makes up that depth right now? Well, you have to look at your starters. You have Josie Jewell. You have Alex Singleton. Now you have an expected increased role here for Drew Sanders, their third-round rookie linebacker out of Arkansas. Justin Sternad entering the final year of his deal in Denver. Ray Wilborn, who spent some time with the team last year on their practice squad. And then you also have Seth Benson, and now Ajike is now added to the mix here. So Denver right now, I'd say, even though you lose Jonas Griffith, that is a massive blow for them, but it's an opportunity for some of these young guys to get some more playing times, for Ajike to maybe carve out a bigger role for himself going forward. Obviously, our well wishes are with Jonas Griffith, and unfortunately, the Broncos have lost a couple of players to some season-ending injuries already. We know last week, Tim Patrick, unfortunately, that was just a massive blow for them with the torn Achilles. KJ Hamler sitting out due to a heart condition right now. He's taking medication for, but now you lose another guy in practice to a major injury in Jonas Griffith. So the Broncos defense are going to find a way to see which depth options for them step up behind Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Drew Sanders, maybe in an accelerated role coming up, because I think he and Jonas Griffith in practice, they actually looked like they worked really well together. So who steps up next to Drew Sanders in the preseason is a huge question to watch here for the linebacker position. Some other news and notes, though, as we continue on here for the Broncos defensively. I think the overall emphasis that we've seen this week from them in the ramp-up period where you throw the shoulder pads on for the first time, it's about playing everything smart. You have to have the physicality. You have to have some game-like simulations. But for the most part, we have seen the defense step ahead of the offense just a tiny bit here. And that's to be expected. I always have to reiterate this because I think a lot of people have their questions and concerns about Russell Wilson and the offense. Well, Broncos head coach Sean Payton doesn't seem to be too worried. He thinks that Russ is doing a fine job here. And look, I think a coach has a little bit more better of an understanding. We watch practice. We see throws happen. And yeah, I think it's valid to question some things, but these guys are going back and they're having meetings, position meetings, coaches meetings. And if Sean Payton right now says that he's not concerned, I believe him. And look, I know what you're thinking. Well, why would he say that he is concerned? Because if he did say that, then obviously the national media would take that. It would run like wildfire. But there's things that he's doing in practice that you do see a little bit more out of. How does he look in the preseason when they play, when starters do play? I imagine play a quarter in the first game. I imagine they play a half in the second game. There's so many things, I think, little nuances that get lost in the mix, because when you see practice and you see the end result of one play happen, it's easy to jump to a conclusion, say, oh my gosh, he had this guy wide open. Oh, he should have thrown it here. None of us know the reads as to, okay, what is Russ's first read, his second read, his third read, so on and so forth. There's so many different things. And you have to give a tip of the cap to the Broncos defense generating a ton of pressure. But Broncos country, we're going to continue our conversation here on Good Morning Broncos. Make sure if you have a cup of coffee as we get ready for our commercial break, we're going to hear from some of our sponsors here, including our friends over there at Superbook. But make sure you refill your cup of coffee. Join me again and sit down here as we're going to break down some observations from the Broncos offense. They had an efficient day during their 7-on-7 period.
With millions of page views every year, ColoradoPreps.com is the #1 source for the high school sports community to keep up with the latest news and scores. From football and volleyball to basketball and softball, ColoradoPreps.com provides a year-round hub for coaches, friends, and family to stay connected to their favorite schools and athletes, and keep an eye on their rivals. Covering high school sports from the peaks to the plains, you always get the latest at ColoradoPreps.com.
Getting into the Broncos 7-on-7 period from Thursday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. Each of the units, the first team offense, the first team defense had some moments, the second team offense and third team offense. It was an efficient day overall from a practice standpoint. Let's pull up my little handy dandy notebook here. on this morning's episode, Good Morning Broncos, charting it and taking a look at it. First team O versus first team D, 7-on-7 period. Referees were in attendance during Thursday's practice. So that was something that was exciting to see there. Now you had a little bit more of a gauge on, was there defensive holding on one play? Was there offensive PI? Was there holding on the, on the offensive lineman when they got to their team period a little bit later on? But looking at the red zone 7-on-7, it opened up with the first team O against the first team defense. We saw Russell Wilson on his first attempt find Cortland Sutton for an 8+ yard gain downfield. Not quite sure if it was 8, 10, 12, but it ended up being a big time play for them. The very next play, Jerry Jeudy, as much of a dynamic route runner as he is, he had an explosive play where he shook the defender, had some separation, caught it, was down, I think, at the 2-yard line. And then on the very next play, there was great coverage. Russell Wilson was looking for Cortland Sutton. Patrick Surtain came away with a tight knockaway there. You love to see that. And there was also a coverage sack where Russell Wilson dropped back on one play, was looking for an open guy, but there was great coverage across the board by Damari Mathis, Justin Simmons, Caden Stearns, and even the linebackers helping out with a running back out of the backfield. That would have been a coverage sack in our book. But then you had Russ to Jerry Jeudy here for a play where they're in the red zone, and he tried coming underneath in a sense on one of the route concepts, and Patrick Surtain just came in, ball side hand, perfect technique, knocked it away. It was a very, very good series between the first team O, first team D, and you have to come away and press that. These guys are going to make each other better, and it's not every day that you have a defense that can generate a pass rush that the Broncos have right now on paper with guys healthy, and also the secondary with guys like Simmons, Surtain, Damari Mathis having a great camp, K'Wan Williams, Asang Bassi stepping in for him today because K'Wan had a Veterans Day off. But let's get to the second team offense here, led by Jarrett Stidham. First play from scrimmage, he found Albert Okwuegbunam for a touchdown. That's a big confidence builder for a guy like Albert O, who's going to have plenty of opportunities in the preseason to showcase what he's able to do. The next play here that they had in the 7-on-7 series, after the touchdown, they walked it back because you're going to restart from the top there. Stidham found Marvin Mims for a catch and run of about 7+ yards in that period there. And then the very next play, he found Marvin Mims for a touchdown on a scrambled drill. The good news to see that, considering, some of the injuries that have happened at wide receiver. Marvin Mims overcoming a hamstring in the offseason and more recently dealing with another one, comes in and catches a touchdown. Big performance him. Good route, good concept of understanding spacing. When the DB was tight on his hip, he did a really good job of trying to get free, running the scramble drill, finding himself open and catching it, getting both feet inbounds for a touchdown. And then the next play, after you score a touchdown, once again, we talk about it. You walk it back. Jarrett Stidham found Kendall Hinton for a touchdown. So a very efficient day for the second team offense in the red zone 7-on-7 period. But now let's get to the third team offense led by Ben DiNucci. Ben DiNucci's first play was a play. He threw it to the running back who ran a route out there. He got 4+ yards on the play. Second play, he connected with tight end Chris Manhertz for a gain of 5+ yards there. And then he capped things off with a touchdown throw to Tyler Beatty, who was showcased as a really, really good training camp so far, a guy who can run the ball effectively well in between the tackles, but also a guy who can be a receiving threat out of the backfield. That was the 7-on-7 recap for the first team, second team, third team offensive units against those defensive units respectively. So a good day overall for the offense. Later on, they transitioned to a team period, and the defense, they added a lot of pressure here once again, made it very difficult for each of the quarterbacks, Stidham, DiNucci, Russ, because they were constantly sending pressure. They had tight coverage when they were in the red zone team period once again. So that's an area where Denver obviously can improve on the offensive side of the ball, but it's going to take some time, more repetition. Sean Payton's not worried about it. To be honest with you, as somebody who's been around football, I've coached it, I've played it, looking at everything that I'm seeing, I'm not necessarily worried about that right now. This is normal at this point of training camp, especially with a brand new offense, new pieces around you. You have to adjust to some of the injuries that have happened, obviously, with Tim Patrick, and you have to find a way for young guys to step up and maybe supplement that production there. But aside from that, there was also a field goal period. It wasn't necessarily an emphasis on them kicking field goals. It was more of a PAT block or field goal block emphasis, according to Sean Payton. So you saw the kickers, Elliott Fry, Brett Maher, they're going through their kicks there. Both players missed kicks from 48 yards and 51 yards, and then Elliott Fry ended practice by nailing a 51-yarder as well. But there will be a little bit more of a competition period because, hey, this morning in Dove Valley, his fans are back in attendance here for training camp, day number 9. They're going to see a 2-minute period. It's going to be a move the ball competitive period, which means that, hey, you will get an opportunity if you have to kick a field goal you're going to see what these guys bring to the table here. There's going to be the first team, second team, third team offense and defense that are going to be competing against each other here once again. And some final news and notes here to close out today's episode of Good Morning Broncos. Some news on Javonte Williams. Sean Payton was asked after practice what his thoughts were, whether or not Javonte was going to play in next week's first preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals. Here's what he had to say.
He'll get reps. It may be we wait till week 2. We haven't gone through the outline of the plays yet, but I like how he's progressing.
I think the biggest key for Javonte coming back is just patience. And I think this coaching staff has shown patience with guys who are coming off major injuries. They don't believe in throwing them in unnecessarily unless they can handle it, right? And I think there's a good formula. You have 2 days in a row of padded practice when you are practicing. You get that third day off. That's a good load management tactic here. But I think for Javonte, he's eager himself to lower his shoulder into somebody that's not his teammate and maybe getting tackled for the first time coming off the ACL injury at the context and the speed at which he's done so. That might be a huge confidence booster for Javonte as training camp and preseason roll along here. But Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in to Good Morning Broncos here this morning. I'm getting ready to head off to Dove Valley for Broncos practice here today. If you see me out there, please do not hesitate. Come say hi to me. We'd love to interact with all of you in Broncos country. If you take time to read the articles that I write at milehighsports.com, you take your time to listen or to watch this show here, I can make time for you who takes time out of your day for me. I appreciate it so much. That'll wrap up today's show. We'll be back on Monday for a brand new Good Morning Broncos as training camp continues. But next week, the theme will be a little bit different. It's game week in Broncos country next week. I'm Cody Roark. See you then.